right, get in, fellas. We are having a fantasy draft. Welcome, boys. If you're watching at home, we've got some familiar faces today for the internet's first therapist fantasy draft. That's right, we're taking every bro's favorite and least favorite construct, fantasy sports. Great because we love them, hate because they're frustrating. And we wanted to use all the therapists over time. The construct today, boys, is we are starting our own practices. You see Doctors Demko, Perez, Katz, and Solomon, and we will each be starting our own private practice and drafting 5 therapists in order to start our practice with us. We'll then have the fans vote on the interwebs, as well as seeking therapists across the country's input on whose teams would make the best therapy practice. Gentlemen, how we doing?
So good. So excited to be back. Ready to rock. We need to build this team.
Dr. Demko is joining us live from Nashville, Tennessee, where he is a child and adolescent inpatient psychiatrist. If he looks familiar, he joined us on session 15, the Dr. Sigmund Freud deep dive episode. Dr. Perez is an addiction psychiatrist. He was recently on the Get In Fellas We're Going to Rehab episode, and before that appeared in the Freud Shit blog talking about dissociation with us. Dr. Perez currently works at Cedar, where we did a tour a few weeks ago. And Dr. Katz, who's joined us with his Sigmund Freud doll front and center, another residency class member of ours. And if he looks familiar, he joined way back in the summer when we did the 5 books you need to know in order to be a kinder, gentler bro. So these guys are all big fans of therapy, all big fans of being bros. And I really, really appreciate their time. How did you prepare for the draft?
Yeah, a whole lot of Wikipedia was my preparation, and then I've got my list here, kind of like organized. I think in terms of selection, it's a little bit unique in this circumstance because I'm not like, oh, I got to make sure I get a kicker or that sort of thing. I can just kind of like go with my favorites. I'm having a little bit of a hard time separating it from still conceptualizing this as a sports team. So I think I might still be partially at least having that influence my decision. Is like how these guys are going to play together in the locker room,
It's important. If we're starting a therapy practice, let's assume that a lot of these people are from the and early 1900s. This will be an in-person therapy practice, so team chemistry is relevant. Dr. Perez, how did you prepare for today?
Weeks and weeks of hard, grueling, just going through the books and just compiling lists and lists.
Grinding the tape.
Yeah.
I was looking at the all-22 view myself as well.
Honestly, my training in the psychotherapy course is really what I think is what I'm gonna go off based on that. So,
Mario does have the most book learning, the most formal therapy training of the 4 of us. That does give him a leg up. Dr. Katz, how did you prepare for today?
Yeah, so outside of course knowing everything about every single one of the people on this list, very curious about ChatGPT, and I figured what better than to interface an artificial intelligence with the very human aspect of therapy and therapists. But I actually was super surprised because ChatGPT generated quite a thorough list for me with a little bit of a biography and interesting facts about the individuals. And then I asked it to generate a list from best to worst based on reputation for kindness and empathy over contributions to the field. Because I figured if we're going to have therapists in an office, I would like them to be kind and empathetic people. But that's of course I double checked it just to make sure ChatGPT wasn't lying.
When people say the list, we made a list of about 35 eligible therapists to draft, all the way back from Freud being the oldest and his birth in 1856, all the way up to some current day therapists, people that are born in the 60s and 70s and stuff, people practicing today and relevant in today's field. I have my list broken down into 3 tiers. I've got my top 10 blue chip prospects with all pro potential. I have my next 10 are starters with maybe some all-star potential. And then the final 10 would be good, solid role players. That's number 21 through 30. And then I've got the rest, which are undrafted free agents. So we can kind of review some of who got left off the board, maybe the final 4 out after we draft. So if you're unfamiliar to a snake draft, which is what we use in fantasy sports, it will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, so on and so forth. That allows for teams to be fair and equitable. We will determine the draft order today based on everyone's favorite childhood game, rock, paper, scissors. We're going odd man out So as the host, I am not eligible to participate in the rock, paper, scissors shootout. So these three guys are going to be going rock, paper, scissors, shoot. And once we get to a odd man out, so two people pick one picks the other, the winner is the odd man out, and they will determine our draft order. Gentlemen, on shoot, and make sure your hands can be seen by the camera. No funny business. All right. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. All right. Mark wins. Mark, what's your draft order?
All right. I'm going to be first.
Mark's first. All right. Katz. Who are the other three? In what order are they going?
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to put Zach second.
Okay. Demko second.
Just because I knew you had someone in the waiting that you really wanted.
Yeah, Mark, hopefully you can take whoever he's hoping for. Zach really wanted the first pick. He's got somebody up his sleeve.
There we go. And then Mario's after that.
Okay.
And I think
right, I'm at the end of the snake. All right, I'm gonna
challenge you the most, Dr. Solomon, as the host.
I like this though. It is a deep draft, I think, in the top 5. So I like my chances at numbers 4 and 5 to get some people left on the board that I'd like. So imagine we were playing some sort of ESPN music. Dr. Katz, you're on the board. You're on the clock.
I think I'm gonna do what probably most people think one of us is gonna do, and just start with Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud, born in Vienna, Austria, born in 1856 and died in 1939. He is considered the father of psychoanalysis, and which I think is a very cool field, as you've probably listened to a lot of episodes, have learned quite a bit about it at this point. But I think ultimately he has the name to bring in the people. So I think that's a big part of it. I don't know if he would necessarily be the easiest to work with.
There would be a lot of drugs flowing through that locker room. Do you think you'd have to have him start on some sort of performance improvement plan
I think so.
He be pissing in cups in your practice?
I think at least a weekly drug testing, just to know what we're dealing with,
Yeah, just to know how high he is at any given time, how many metabolites are in his system.
Exactly.
You got to get used to the cigar smoke, because I don't think he was going to not.
Oh yeah.
We'll put his office at the end of the building with the best ventilation and yeah.
But we do. Both Mark and I are rocking homages to Freud today, so that makes sense. Dr. Demko, you're up.
All right. I like that pick for you, Dr. Katz. And I think that our boy Sigmund deserved to go first overall. I'm going to keep it in the family and go Anna Freud at number 2 for my team. And I will tell you a couple reasons why. Anna Freud, I do not have the chat GPT descriptions pulled up, so I don't know when she was born, but she's an early 1900s gal. Defense mechanisms of defense is her big contribution, which I think is just such a fantastic thing that we use to conceptualize. It stayed so consistent as many of these theories kind of age and seem weirder and more bizarre over time. I feel like that's one that's just like a total rock. The papers that we read of hers in our psychotherapy scholars, among some of my favorites, they're like little speeches. But most importantly, defense wins championships, baby. So that's where we're starting right there.
Yeah, and it did, especially in that early group, had a really nice way of writing that was pretty accessible in comparison, especially to her father, who sometimes it was hard to make out what the hell he was going for. Yeah, defense wins championships. I like that strategy. We learned that from the good Dr. Yakub in some of those episodes back in the day. Dr. Perez, you're up.
All right. I think I would go with Carl Rogers then.
Carl Rogers is a big name. Tell us about Dr. Rogers.
Yeah, he's the founder of this kind of person-centered therapy, which I think all therapy is based on. He had this revolutionized the therapeutic relationship, really big into empathy, the authenticity, just like talking with a person and just having this unconditional positive regard. I think that's the word that we associate with him. He adds a really humanistic depth to some of these older guys that you guys are picking. So I think it was more of like, let's just have a conversation. I hear you. I want to help you. He was born in 1902 in Park Oak, Illinois, is where he's from. So he's the first American, I guess, on the board. Practiced mid-century.
There we go. That is first American. I like this. Not as high on my list. I don't think it's a sexy of a name, Mario. But when I was looking and prepping for this, if you look at psychiatrists when they're polled about who the most influential therapists are, Rogers is very high, as is Carl Jung, higher than some of the other big names that we might think about today. So that is on to your host with picks number 4 and 5. Guys, there's a lot of names that I really like on the board. So I'm gonna go with who I think is obvious in the way that I practice. I like to think developmentally and I'm going to take Eric Erickson, number 4 overall. Native of Frankfurt, Germany, also practiced in the early 1900s. He came up with the Ericksonian stages of development. So the idea that at any time in the lifespan of a person, we should be aiming to accomplish certain things, both mentally, socially, and off these offshoots came moral development and other things about the fact that we have to grow over time. Erickson is the reason that I use the old adage, we all get older. It does not mean we grow up. To emphasize that even as we age numerically, we do not necessarily age developmentally.
No one stumbled over it,
Erickson's a
if I'm gonna be
fan
honest.
favorite. And because I do not think she will get back to me in the snake, for my 5th pick, the top pick in the 2nd round, I'm going to take Marshall Linehan. Now, this is a controversial pick. So not controversial in any way other than not the biggest name as far as history goes, right? So Marshall Linehan is our first living draft pick. So hello, Dr. Linehan, if you ever get a chance to listen to this. So she's a native of Tulsa, Oklahoma, right in Middle America, born in 1943. If you've been listening a lot, you'll hear that she founded dialectical behavioral therapy. I'm in the late 80s when she was practicing. She really was learning, and a lot from her own experience of struggling with borderline PD, that the types of therapies we had were not helping people who struggled with big emotions, struggled to slow it down, impulsive action, suicidality, and this therapy was monumental. And I would imagine on this list, if we were going by lives saved, she would be the highest number based on how many lives DBT has saved. So the reason I bring her into our practice is things get heated at work. And if anybody has taught us how to slow things down and make good choices, that's Dr. Linehan. So I'm happy with my starts. You are up, Dr. Perez. Back to you and the snake.
All right. Let me see. I think I'm going to go with Winnicott, I think. Yeah.
Right.
D.W. Winnicott, born in 1896 in Plymouth, England, practiced mostly, early to mid-century, but I think he's another key figure in kind of this relational theme that I'm going with. The concepts of good enough parenting, you have to just be a good enough parent, and the child will, develop correctly. And then also the transitional object, I think, is a big contribution that we use quite a bit. So I think he was an easy second pick for me.
I had Winnicott 3rd overall on my board. I strayed away from it at the time, but I agree, Mario. I use the term good enough parenting in my practice all the time. Talk to my friends about it, family, just that construct of like, Freud was pretty serious. Winnicott came in and was like, it's okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. Right. It's a good locker room presence.
And he did everything I hear, he was a pediatrician, right, early on, and he has that like grandfatherly type of presence that it was easy to talk to. So he would be a no-brainer for me.
Dr. Demko, you're up.
Oh, yes. All right. Well, I'm going, let's see, we got some big names still sticking around. I'm going Carl Jung next.
That is a big name. Biggest name on the board for sure.
Yes. And I'm very pleased because I had him and Anna there as my top 2. So I'm glad that he was still sticking around. So Carl Jung, he's late 1800s, early 1900s guy, big buddy of Freud there, Swiss dude. Instrumental a lot in kind of the early foundings of psychoanalysis. He had his own kind of analytical psychology and we call it Jungian analysis there. He's got a ton of really great concepts that we have to be grateful for now. A lot of focus on like individuation, the collective unconscious, which is a fantastic thing to have in your team, right? Is somebody who can understand the cohesiveness that's like in the nonverbal communication side of things and everything. Lots of symbolic interpretation he did. So I feel like he can help us with like our branding, which goes a long way for your team, right? Is you got to have a symbol to rally behind. And he did a ton of dream work, which I enjoy. And also, with this collective unconscious dream work thing, we can get some reps in our sleep as well. So we're always training. This practice is just like grinding nonstop.
We've got at least one more dream focused person on the board. So we'll see if they go. Dr. Katz, in the spirit of a snake draft, you have 2 picks now. You'll have the end of the 2nd and the beginning of the 3rd round.
All righty. So I think for my 2nd pick, I'm going to have to go with John Bowlby for the child in all of us, for the child athlete in all of us. He was born in London, in England, was alive from 1907 to 1990. I like this guy. He really is the father of attachment theory, I would say. or the child of attachment theory, if he was probably what he would say. So I think just as a general gist, attachment theory, I think, does a nice job of synthesizing a lot of his predecessors in the way of thinking about development and childhood and kind of the importance of like early attachment figures. So I think he appreciates a lot about connection and about the child in all of us. I think he seems like a pretty ethical and kind dude. So I think he'd make a pretty strong player on the team.
Yeah, I like it, Dr. Katz. So that's the end of the second round. We got some big names off the board. Some big names currently. I think a lot of the younger, like currently alive people who are relevant in the field today, a lot of those are still hanging around. So, Dr. Katz, you'll also lead off the third round.
Ooh, I'm going to say Bessel van der Kolk.
That's a good one.
He's a cool dude. Wrote The Body Keeps the Score. He appreciates the nature of trauma and how it impacts everybody. Let me pull up some information for him. So he was born in The Hague, the Netherlands. Was born 1943 to present. He's influenced a lot of mental health. Apparently, he's had some pretty big influence in EMDR, yoga therapy, and somatic experiences. So he's really into the body work, and I think in the spirit of athleticism and therapy, body work does well. Body keeps the
I think,
score.
Mark,
We're gonna
you
keep
and
the
I,
score.
if you talk about that like 5 books episode and you go back, I think what we've really emphasized on this show is wanting people to think in a developmental and specifically a developmental trauma lens is our focus. And that's really after decades of that kind of thinking going away, you notice a big gap here amongst these therapists in terms of like Bowlby talk attachment. And then it really went away for like 60 years as we tried to push away trauma and focus more on the science. And then van der Kolk and his crew focusing on PTSD in the 70s and 80s really brought that stuff back to the forefront. So it's a great pick, Mark. Was definitely in my top 10 tier. Dr. Demko, you are up.
All right. I'm getting an American on the team now. We're going Aaron Beck for number 3 for Team Demko. I said he's a U.S. dude. Another passed away recently, didn't he?
2021.
I think our little chat GPT says he's still alive, but I think he passed away in like 2021 or something like
21,
that.
yep.
ChatGPT.
But father of cognitive therapy and CBT, baby, and that is got to be the most popular therapeutic modality that exists right now. Certainly the one that has been studied the most from an empirical standpoint, right? It's the easiest to back science because it's so textbook or manualized, which, is one of its drawbacks. It's not going to work for absolutely everybody, but it's got a broad range. It's going to put butts in the seats and everything like that, It's not going to fix absolutely everything, but it's going to be helpful. So I think a crucial member of the team there from that standpoint.
Most
Exactly.
importantly. I think what CBT did was it made therapy accessible to the people, and this is what you're going to be teaching in schools with younger kids. This is what you're going to be working on really early when you're looking to build basic skills with people. So a real fundamental player. Dr.
Consistent
Demko.
but versatile. We like that.
Dr. Perez, you're up.
I'm going to try to round out my team and go with Heinz Kohut.
We know Dr. Perez to be a big self-states guy. He's really leaning in to the ego, the self-work. Another Vienna, Austria native. I would ask what's the deal and why so much therapy came out of Vienna, Austria in the 10s, 20s, 30s, but we know the answer to that. So, it wasn't exactly fun in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire in the 10s, 20s, and 30s. If you all need a history lesson, just think a little harder.
But yeah, no, I picked him, because he is the founder of self-psychology, so I'm going to take a, turn away from psychoanalytic at this point, so this could be a controversial pick on my end, I suppose. Like you said, just the development of the self and the critical roles of relationships, kind of fostering healthy narcissism and identity, I think are important. So yeah, let's look at the self kind of thing.
So I really notice everybody's trying to put together either themes that they rely on, dynamics to their practice. So, I've got some development thinking, I have some skill-based thinking, and I really am lacking in terms of analysis. So I'm going to go with, and this is no surprise to anybody who knows the show, my living GOAT, Dr. Nancy McWilliams. Just would not have been appropriate if I did not have her book laying up behind me. So huge fan of Dr. McWilliams. If you want to hear some of her thoughts, go back to our season finale from session 1. where we use her framework to talk about the 10 qualities of mental health. And the reason that I really latched on to psychoanalytic diagnosis, so she's from Abington, Pennsylvania, born in 1945. She's coming to speak in Denver in September. Mario, Mark, maybe Zach, you want to come in town? We'll all be there to hear her talk at the meetings in September. Psychoanalytic diagnosis does an excellent job of talking about a range of functioning. So when you've watched this show and you've watched me hold up my hands, put that spectrum out there and say, we are using our defenses on a range of healthy, neurotic, borderline, and psychotic. That is the framework for that book. And that helped formulate how I have thought about patients and think about humans and thinking. So I found that book and her framework to be fundamental for how I think about people in practice. Plus, honestly, go watch any of those videos. We need, we're going to have 2 women in the office now. So that's awesome. I was shocked when I looked at this list, considering how old it was, how gender equal it was. So we're going to be hitting a lot of this and have some good, positive grandma vibes, in the office.
Also,
so,
her book, it's like super easy to read. There's not a whole lot of psycho jargon, anything like that. It's
I have recommended psychoanalytic diagnosis to lay people who want to understand it at another depth. And I really do. There's a little bit of stuff you'd have to think on, but she does really a big part of this show. And what I'm shooting for is to be able to explain these things in an accessible language. And I think, thanks for pointing that out, Mario and Zach, that she does an excellent job of that and deserves to be praised for that, even individually. So I would not be me as a therapist if I did not bring on as my next pick, so the top of the 4th round, Lawrence Kohlberg. So the reason I want to bring Dr. Kohlberg on is, one, we're big developmental thinkers in our groups. We've got Erickson and Kohlberg. He was born in the Bronx in 1927. So a youngin' during the Great Depression in those eras here in the state. He was the one who founded the stages of moral development. So if anything in our practice, gents, we are going to be moral, upstanding people. And so now we have the master of morals to help us keep in line and act as a good, healthy group together. Feeling good about my squad, 4 out of 5 in. Dr. Perez, back to you.
You could be avoiding some team scandals there with the morality police.
Yes.
I was going to say, his whole Heinz dilemma, right? The man stealing medicine for his wife and whether that's moral or not. Yeah, that'd be a fun group to hang out with. Let me think here.
For the record, my top 10 is now cleared out. My initial board. I got no more. Nancy was my last one in my top 10. So we're staying pretty true to form here. Not a lot of reaches so far.
Okay, let's do it. I'm going to go with Viktor Frankl.
Big name.
As you guys maybe know, he survived the Holocaust, so right? That's a good reason to know. Founder of logotherapy, emphasized kind of that humanistic search, just a very driven search in us to find meaning. That's kind of our central being, our central force in life is why I'm picking him. So, I think his existential approach will, round out my team more so instead of, just always thinking inward.
Round out your team, you're going to have 5 players, Mario, just as a reminder.
Okay.
You're going to get one more.
But he is another Vienna guy, so I must be picking these guys from Vienna. That's the way I'm going with it. So, 1905 to 1997, practice of mid-20th century. But like you said, that book's like an essential read. I'm not sure you guys have talked about it on this before.
Yeah, if you didn't catch, Survivor of the Holocaust, Man's Search for Meaning, the first half of it occurred in Auschwitz, the concentration camp, where he was named a camp doctor, even though he was a Jewish prisoner of the camp and his experience there in Auschwitz. So really important and heavy read if you're interested in such a thing, but it's pretty short. And then it launches into this logotherapy, which is essentially a therapy behind getting meaning in life and having that be an important aspect. But we're going backwards. I'm lost. This would not be a snake draft if we didn't get lost in the snake at least once. So we are on the backswing to you, Demko.
All right. I'm going Selma Freiberg next.
Big
psychoanalyst, big on trauma development, childhood experiences, all that jazz. I think that unfortunately she has passed as well. I was trying to get some more living people, but wrote what is my favorite psychological paper of all time, Ghosts in the Nursery. It's like the one paper that I make every student that I ever work with read. It's another one kind of similar to the McWilliams textbook where it's like a narrative style. So people who aren't in the field, I feel like, enjoy it as well. I've had friends or family members read it who are not psychiatrists, and still it's accessible and makes sense. I'm sorry if you hear my babies screaming in the
Maybe being a young father, Zach, you
It's
might
now.
realize that she'd written The Magic Years, which is
Oh yeah,
also like
another
still
really
to this
great one.
day recommended and read as far as young child development.
Yep. So favorite paper, got to get her on the team for that. Also, the generational trauma, I think, is something that a lot of sports franchises experience as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like, how often do you hear that the team is cursed, or like there was some trade or incident that happened all these years ago? None of those players are even on the team anymore, but the team can't move past it. Those are the ghosts in the nursery for the teams there, right? And we're going to be dodging that with Selma.
Got to break those cycles of trauma and dysfunction, right? It's
yes,
exactly it.
Dr. Freiberg coined the term kitchen table therapy. So maybe in that, so going into the home and seeing really what the family unit was like. And so maybe your team, Zach, you guys are going to be doing a lot of break room, therapy, like over the lunch
there you
table,
go.
making sure we're doing good, healthy group dynamics. So Dr. Katz, you are up. This is going to be your 4th and your 5th pick. So the bottom and then your last pick as well.
Katsy.
Choose wisely. Alrighty.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. I think for the number 4, I'm going to go with Esther Perel.
Nice
she
pick,
is
Mark.
the maker of the podcast of Where Should We Begin? She's a birth Brussels, Belgium, born 1958, and is still alive doing her thing. She's a big couples therapist, and I think a good clinic can always use a good couples therapist because it's a pretty challenging niche specialty to be in. And there's a lot of couples and a lot of couples needing therapy. And I think even if we're to have some conflicts break out on the team, it could help to have someone navigate that. So I think she'd be a strong player.
Where should we begin? I mean, she's had these turned into like board games. I mean, she may very well be like the most famous therapist right now practicing.
Pretty prolific. I mean, I'm looking at this list, and I know like Brene Brown is pretty big. I mean, she was like a New York Times 6 times New York Times bestseller. But I don't know. I think Esther Perel and her couples work is pretty strong. Sweet. Okay. For the last one, let's see. This is a tough one to choose because there's so many other good ones too. But I think Dan Siegel is going to have to be my last one. Let's see. He was born in the United States, born 1957, still alive. I think he did a great job at just bridging neuroscience and psychiatry and psychology. So I think, bringing the more concrete biological sciences to the more subjective experience of therapy is pretty cool. He also does a lot of work in connecting parents to understanding their kids better, like the whole brain child book. So I think it rounds out my my roster because I feel like we got couples work there, we got child and adolescent work, we got the big name Freud, we got Bowlby, again, child work, but appreciating the child in all of us. So I don't know. I think I'm happy where we landed here. I think we're gonna win.
Yeah, feels good. I had a feeling you'd go for Siegel at the end. Mark's a big believer in the whole brain child and the science behind validation. So things are going well. I like our squads as they form. Dr. Demko, your final pick.
All right, I'm struggling here. I'm kind of torn between two guys here at the end, but I'm just gonna stick with what I've got on my board here and go Piaget for my finale. Piaget. He's got his own kind of theory of cognitive development there, broke it into 4 separate stages: the sensory motor, or pre-operational, the concrete operational, and then the formal operational. I think he's another Swiss dude. And he's gonna be great for the team because really organized like development there. He's gonna help us in the practice squad. He's gonna be down there in the trenches as we work our way through these sensory motor stages into our formal operations as a practice and as a cohesive team. Also got to get him in the squad because the Piaget like little experiments where they demonstrate these different stages are like my favorite videos to show people where the kids struggle to understand the concepts of like the conservation of the amount of liquid between the different glasses, and your perspective is different from my perspective. It's just like such a very clear and easily demonstrated model elements. I appreciate that about it. It's like something you can really see change over time. And now I get to see happen with the crazy children screaming upstairs. So
Very cute. Dr. Demko's a hell of a father and husband. Dr. Perez, your final pick.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna round it out, go a little bit modern, and add a woman as well. I'm gonna go with Brene Brown. I think she's one of the more popular modern therapists, big into vulnerability, shame, and making connections, things like that. The power of vulnerability, I think, is one of the most watched talks of all time. I'm sure, so you can't go wrong.
One thing I noted as I was making this list, Dr. Brown, she has a PhD in social work. So she is the only licensed clinical social worker on our list. Just more of an observation, not to say that there haven't been huge contributions to the field, but her being an example. Especially as things become more about, media, social media, things like that. I'm sure therapists of all different types will be important influences in the field as we go. Whew! Boys, I am left really struggling here.
there's some good names still around.
There's a lot of big names. We will certainly go with some of the best of the rest after I finish this pick. But again, this is practicing. I think it's a big name. She, is really relevant to my practice and what I work with people on when I practice. And that will be Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Born in Zurich, Switzerland, 1926. She passed in 2004. Her book on death and dying is still hugely informative in the process of grief. And then if that name sounds familiar, she developed the Kubler-Ross stages of grief in 1969. And when you think about DABDA, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, like I haven't said that, I must talk about, if any of my patients are listening or any of my friends, I think about the stages of grief a lot of times every single day as we mourn loss in our lives, not just a passing of loved ones, but change as well as a way of mourning. So I feel pretty good about my team. I think we're healthy, we're well-rounded, we're skilled. Who are some of the best of the rest, boys? Who is on your list that we didn't get to?
Well, first, Kubler-Ross is a great ad because you're going to take some L's, right, on the journey, on the path to the championship, and she's going to be there to help you guys, not get into the slump, right? Process that, accept it, move on to the next game. So
make sure we know this is healthy, that these are important parts of the process. We're going to be angry and it's okay. It's okay.
I was thinking maybe you were going to go Klein with your last pick, and I think that's a big name that we left on the board is Melanie Klein. And
biggest name between Emil Kraepelin and Melanie Klein, I think, are the two biggest names. Otto Kernberg, too. Object relations just doesn't... It's important because it was pretty transformative in the field, but it doesn't really get me all that excited. Also, Melanie Klein had, there was a lot of beef, right? There was a lot of beef in the object relations camp, so I'm not sure that she'd be helping bring us all together.
You want that drama in the locker room.
I don't know her personally, but I do know that it wasn't able to become a cohesive thought as the schools of American and British object relations dueled it out at one point. Mario, you brought some people to the table that you didn't end up picking.
Yeah, I think I also had Klein on my list, so I was going back and forth. Irvin Yalom, I think, was going to be another choice. Another existentialist type person. Mary Ainsworth, I think, was one also I was thinking about. And also attachment theory and kind of that strange situation with the kid and the stranger.
Cincinnati native. Mary Ainsworth, 513.
Yeah. Shout out for that.
We're probably about 5 minutes from my childhood home in Glendale, right up the block from Reading in Cincinnati.
Yeah, those are the ones I think I was struggling to throw in.
I also, on this list, had Lindsay Gibson, who wrote more recently the Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents series, which I think is doing a lot right now for people trying to wiggle out of those roles. And as the kind of Gen X and millennials look to separate and parent differently than their boomer generation parents did, I think that's been a really accessible book for people. Of note, nobody picked Dr. Phil. Anyone have reasons? It was on the board. It was Dr. Phil McGraw was a candidate to be picked. Did not crack the lineup.
Well, my only note for him was that if I get stuck with him, it's so that we can scapegoat him for whatever happens.
Yeah, it seems a little longer. Maybe if we were trying to put together full fantasy roster lengths, he would have had to go to somebody. Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Maslow we left on the board.
Maslow was my guy. I would have chosen. Yeah, Mark Solms. I think he has some cool work on the affective circuitry in the brain. So I think it's just some cool niche field of psychiatry and psychology. Did anyone choose Kernberg?
No, Kernberg was left on the board. Really
Kernberg. I
important.
think he gets borderline and narcissistic people pretty well, or at least his kind of schema of it. And those are big words being used a lot today. And so I think it's good to have someone who kind of who was there at the forefront of coming up with them.
Mario, you took Kohut, right?
I did.
I feel like when you're conceptualizing narcissism, that's like the Kohut Kernberg is the OA.
Yes. Yep.
Which framework are we going to take there, kind of things?
It would have been good to have.
We got one of the two.
Yeah.
At their rosters, let's go through, and I will start this. Who would be your team captain? We are the coaches. Who would be your team captain? They're going to represent. They're going to be, good locker room presence. Maybe not your best, your most talented player, but somebody whose overall presence you like. And I think, as we discussed, I'm going to go. I have a lot of really good eggs on my team. I thought about Nancy. She's that veteran presence, very calming voice. But I'm going to go with Kohlberg as my team captain. I think anybody who's known for morals and how we should all be acting morally is going to be a good captain of your team. Dr. Demko, who's your team captain?
I'm sticking Carl Jung with the captaincy there. I feel like that's almost a no-brainer. Although I do have some really good names on my team. I feel like he's like the day ones, so I feel like he's got it from that standpoint. He probably he had a lot of students and has been in a role of leadership with this kind of thing in general. But again, that concept of the collective unconscious just lends itself so well to the captaincy there, of kind of understanding the interdimensional third space between our players as we develop this practice and this team for these hypothetical championships that we're going to be winning a lot of. I feel like Beck is like my franchise player, like he's going to be scoring all the goals, but Young's there kind of like guiding him on this journey. So
yeah, Zach team
just
became a hockey
shut me down, shut down defense at all times from Anna Freud. She is a brick wall. Nobody's getting past her.
Yes. We didn't really identify what kind of sports we were going for. 5 made you think of a basketball team.
All of them.
5 would also make Zach think of a hockey team, minus the goalie, I suppose. So, but it does make sense. Anna Freud as your goalie is an excellent thought. Dr. Perez, who's your captain?
I think it's a no-brainer for me. It's going to be Carl Rogers. Person-centered therapy is, like I said, that cornerstone of relational and humanistic approach. So he's going to be focused on kind of the team, looking for connections, team for personal growth within it. So I think for sure he's going to be the one that's going to lead them.
Dr. Katz?
Sweet. I think I'm going to have to choose Esther Perel as my captain. I think, number one, for some feminine energy leading the crew.
Good call.
I think, we need a little bit of that. And she, I don't know, she emphasizes a lot of like mutual understanding and cooperation and connection. Listening to her podcast, I think she does a good job at like kind of getting to the meat of a lot of like interpersonal conflicts. And so, I'm looking at my list. I think Freud, big name, big ego. I think we're going to need someone to help kind of navigate, this.
He's a little like
Reel him in a little bit.
Yeah. Like, hey, your cocaine use is getting a little too obtrusive to our
trying to think of in like sports, who are some guys who were like awesome, but you never would have been like the captain, like Dennis Rodman. Freud's got those kinds of vibes.
Exactly.
Oh wow, Mario! Dennis, he's sure under that.
It's perfect. Wow. Did you guys plan that?
We did.
No, boys. So audience, if you made it till the end of this, then you're just a nerd and you're our kind of nerd. So please reach out and let us know what you thought about this. I think it's hysterical. I don't know if anyone's going to learn anything from it, but we all thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope people could see how much passion and love we have for this field, knowing that we've been thinking about people for a very long time. And mostly what you heard is that a lot of these people are going to overlap with each other in terms of how they see people, which is thinking pretty hard, understanding that everybody's got complicated backgrounds and we should be holding empathy. I really would be what any of these therapists would want us to do. Next week, if you're listening along, we're going to be switching into our neurodivergence block. So we're going to be starting with our friend, Dr. Matt Zakreski, the author of the Neurodiversity Playbook, to teach us about neurodiversity in general. Boys, it's a great time. Thank you so much for indulging my silly, lovely, fun idea.
It is a lovely idea. Thank you for having us. It's fun.
Dr. Demko has already signed up for when we run this back with fictional therapists from media. So hopefully you guys will want to join, and you're free to anybody drop in the chat some ideas of famous fictional therapists for us to start on. So otherwise, we'll wrap up this episode as we do every week, guys. And when you're out in the world, let's try and find ways to be kinder and gentler. See y'all next week.